Hello, everybody. Today's Tutorial Tuesday, which is all about 5 things that you can fix in your copy to look more pro, super stat. The idea here is that over years and years and years of me first writing copy and later obviously testing and all of that stuff and reviewing copy, there are some things along the way that stand out. And it's hard to put these in a blog post because we don't do listicles. And it's just like one of those things, like these stack up over time and I keep seeing them happening. And so I'm like, well, let's just do a tutorial on that because we do have every other week is a new topic. The second Tuesday of the month is for beginners. And this is really important stuff to know if you are newer to copywriting. And it's also something to correct if you've been doing this for a while and you just didn't know. Some of us are out there writing copy without anybody ever coaching us or giving us real feedback on it outside of clients. If you're a freelancer and you went straight from one job into another, say you were a teacher, you retired, you're like, I'm going to try this copywriting thing. You might be learning from people like us, but often doing the writing on your own and getting feedback from clients who don't know any better. So I want to walk you through 5 things that I think that you should do to very quickly make sure you're correcting. They're not even mistakes. They're not mistakes. They're problems that happen in copy, making it seem like the copy is not as sharp or polished as it could be. So what I'm going to do is walk you through these 5 little problems. I'm going to call them problems, even though we might not call them problems. We're going to call them that. And I'm not going to show you the negative example because I find when I'm teaching copywriting, as soon as you show a negative example, it can be really easy to feel bad for the person whose example is up there when everybody really does mean well. I haven't met anybody in the copywriting world, personally at least, who is trying to mess up. And this is one part science, sure, but there's also a lot of art to it. And so I don't want to show negatives because they can feel negative. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to tell you what the problem is. I'm going to show you basically solutions to it or how to do it better. So the first one is you center your body copy. I'm leading with this one because it's so huge. Most freelance copywriters do this across sales pages. And they do it across their own websites or websites even that they're writing for clients. You can center headlines and you can center crossheads. You can center a button and the copy in a button. You should not center your body copy. And I'm going to show you what you should do. So the problem, and this is why I don't want to show negative examples, because then you have to bring somebody's site up and then they feel bad about themselves. And again, this is a really common mistake and you shouldn't feel bad about yourself. You just have to stop doing it immediately. So if it's not a crosshead, it's not a headline, it's not a button, ask yourself, why am I centering this? If it's because you weren't thinking about it and you just did it by default, that's not the way to become a great copywriter. So do everything intentionally. It doesn't take much longer to do it intentionally. You just have to ask, like, why did I do that? And then fix it if you don't have a good reason why. Okay, so let me move on when Google Slides catches up. Okay, so this is an example of what should be centered and what should not be centered. So what should be centered is this, how it works, that little eyebrow copy at the top. What if you could turn the same number of leads into twice the deals for a solution called Follow Up Boss? The headline is centered. Headlines can be centered. Long headlines, this is a pretty long headline. It can still be centered. It's fine. You don't have to center a headline, but when it comes to things that can be centered and should not be centered, headlines, perfectly fine. Body copy, not as good. It's very hard to read copy that is centered, especially since most people who are centering their copy, their body copy, are it's spreading across the whole width of the page, which is extremely difficult. So we want to keep our copy in columns. And the more copy you write, the more you should think in terms of how wide is this column. And I know that might feel early for you to think about that, but look at newspapers. There is a reason that copy in newspapers is written in columns. The headline can span the whole page and can be centered, but the copy is not. Newspapers are optimized for readability. They're optimized for me to sit down, consume the content quickly, get the point, and move on with my life. that's our job when we're formatting too. Are we formatting our copy to make sure that you can sit down, consume what you need to, pay attention to the things you need to, and the supporting stuff to help like beef up that headline or crosshead, that needs to be something that I can sit down, look at, read without getting fatigued. So you want to have that left margin. And this is if you read anything about studies on readability. There are actual institutes that study this. The left margin being flat, being like this for like Western readers. It varies if you read differently, if your page is laid out differently. But for most of us English speakers, you're going to want to have a left-hand margin, a left side margin that's flat, where you could put a ruler up against it and an eye can keep butting against it. And I can depend on it being there at every point. The right is called the ragged right, and we want to leave that ragged right. That's actually good for readability too. So you don't want to have a column where everything is like justified across the column and it turns into this perfectly lined up column, which is really good for OCD people who are like, it's neat and tidy now, but it's actually harder to read. So don't center your body copy. When you do have body copy, do your best to make it as readable as possible. And you can talk to your clients about this stuff too. So they can get that extra confidence and assurance that you actually know what you're doing with really simple things like knowing the term ragged right. Okay, now there are situations where you can center body copy. This is, again, lead with the rule, never center body copy. But then if you are thinking in terms of columns, and this is like if you use WordPress or lead pages to write your copy, and this is why a lot of copywriters should go in and use the actual tools of the trade so that you get what it's like to actually lay out copy on a page or in an email. If you think in terms of columns, you'll look at a page separately or differently than you would if you don't think in terms of columns. So if you know anything about photography, photographers look at something and they have their own rules. They have like a grid, they have magic numbers, they have things they're looking at. Copywriters have to do it the same way too. We just look in terms of like columns and sections of a page. Like, okay, I'm in this section of a page, I've got this many columns, those columns might not all be the same width, et cetera, et cetera. You'll learn more about this as you go. Just know, stop thinking about a page as this big lump of stuff to fill in with copy however you feel like doing it. And start thinking more about, okay, once I get the copyright, how do I make it so it's more consumable? So this is an example of, on the same website, Follow Up Boss, this is an example of centering body copy. So in this case, we wanted to have all the focus on this great, big, beautiful screenshot. It's a video you can play, it's great, we want eyes there. Having it pushed off to the side would make it smaller. It would allow us to put that body copy over to the left, but it would make it smaller, and we wanted to focus the viewer on this. So we take the body copy, we put it up under that crosshead there, which is centered, and we're allowed to center crossheads, but we put the body copy up top, and we think in terms of columns. So we've got effectively, this might seem crazy, but it'll get better as you move through it. You've got effectively 5 or 6 columns across the width of a page, and you've got 2 columns on either side that are blank, and the rest of the copy fills in the middle. Now, this again, you'll be like, what does it matter? It matters because if your copy runs the full width of the page, it's just harder to read. So narrow that up, try to get it as much as like newspaper style as you possibly can without it actually looking weird on the page. This is an example of when you can center body copy, but note that it is not long. We wrote this copy. We know why decisions were made for this. So you want to make sure that it's nice and tight, not longer than 3 lines. Ideally 2 lines. Once you get into 4, it's an awful lot for the eye to keep running back and forth and have no like hard left to hit against. So that's rule number 1. Number 2, you use throwaway text instead of intentional button copy. So repeatedly when I'm reviewing a freelance copywriter's copy or anybody's copy, frankly, and I see their button copy and I say, well, why that? And they don't have an answer. And this happens way too often. You need to have an answer. The button is the site of conversion on a page. You cannot convert online. You can call. Sure, if there's a phone number, you can call without having to click a button. But everything else that's happening online is happening on a button or a text link. Both of them are equally important. A button people will click a button pretty easily. So it's easy to say like, oh, you don't have to worry about it. They'll click it. It's true. People click things, but is it a good click? Is it a click that reinforces like the value of moving forward and things like that? So be intentional with your button copy, or a client will ask you, all it takes is a client asking you, well, why that? And you not having an answer for you to immediately look like you don't know what you're doing. You could have 20 years of experience, but if you weren't thinking of that button copy and you just threw in whatever felt right, oh, sign up now, get free trial, all of those sorts of things, you think that's the right thing to do, but it's the actual site of conversion. It is, if you run, this is why button tests are the easiest split tests to run, because everybody has to either click or choose not to click a button. So you can very quickly get results on what people will do and will not do based on the copy that you write. Okay, so here's an example of an intentionally written button. This is on Aurora, is an organic bed in a box. Shop the Aurora organic bed. So this is on their homepage. This is, or I think this is actually their product detail page, where you can now go put together the Aurora organic bed. Instead of shop now, we're reinforcing what you're actually shopping for, the Aurora organic beds, because we're trying to differentiate the product against other beds and boxes that are filled with harmful, like toxic materials. This is non-toxic. This is where you're actually going to like feel really good about what you're like laying on all night. So shop the Aurora organic bed. It's an intentional button. We could have just said shop now. We went more intentional so that we can reinforce the reason to choose this particular bed. Okay. Oh, sorry, that was going backward. Another one, add to cart. You don't have to get crazy on your buttons. You just have to know why you did it. Add to cart might be a throwaway button unless you're doing it intentionally. If you're like, no, they're actually ready to add to cart and the user needs to know that now the thing they're doing is adding it to their cart, it's allowed. If get free trial, start free trial, sign up now, claim my offer, if those are actually the right buttons to use in that moment, go ahead and use them. What I'm asking you to do as a beginner copywriter and all the way through your career is to think, is this the right button copy? That's it. And if your answer is add to cart is the right button copy here, cool. Just make sure you have that answer. The third one, personality. Okay, so you're letting the personality on so thick it's like frosting on a cupcake, not just any frosting, but like the kind you can literally like lift off the cupcake in a solid mass. So gross. This is overdoing it. Now, there is something to be said for what's called maximalist copywriting, where you really go to town on something, usually in the context of more minimalist copywriting. We can talk about that in the future, like advanced copywriting tutorial. Too many freelancers or copywriters start their career thinking they're supposed to be creative. More often than not, you're not. So if you went into copywriting to have a creative outlet, you're probably in the wrong business. This is actually a sales business. We just use words to connect with people and persuade them. So overdoing it on the personality, really, I know people think it makes them sound like really good. And there are cases where you should, where the brand wants to push really hard on personality, but that has to be a discussion between you and the person who's hired you or the company you're working for. When you default to laying on personality really thick, it tends to actually look amateurish. So we did a tutorial on this a couple months ago, maybe even a year ago, actually, now that I think about it. It's on like the artfulness of copywriting. Basically nothing else we talk about ever at the Copyhackers with our conversion copywriting has anything to do with the art of it, because the art comes pretty naturally to a lot of people, and we have to kind of rein that in with the science, the math, all of that kind of stuff behind it. So we want to go easy on personality. You should really only use personality in two places when you're starting out. Don't break the rule until you've done this for a couple years. Start with only using personality in headlines and in crossheads. That's it. Your headline is allowed personality. That doesn't mean you have to use it. It means if you're writing for a brand that needs personality, or that's like part of the brief, then headline, crosshead. Outside of that, no. I mean, never, no. Now, in an email, that's another story. And again, talk to your client about that. What did they hire you for? What kinds of emails do they love? And then how much personality do you need? But always default to less is more. Okay, so really good example. If you want to look at how to be creative, well, Apple has the best web copy for actually learning what to do right and paying attention. You can see they've got centered copy, but it's in columns. It's not across the page. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. The personality is light. Lay it down, charge it up. That's it. That's the language that they're using. It's not heavy on personality, but in context, it feels right for the brand. And that's the only place where the copywriter can get more creative. The power of 24-hour battery life. Everything after that is very, very technical. That's the only thing that's venturing toward having personality. And you can see it's not a lot of personality, but it still gives the reader a little bit to feel emotional about before they dig into the logical stuff. Don't overdo it on personality. Okay. This is a common one across the board for everybody, and that is leading with the brand name, company name, product name, feature name, or we instead of you, the prospect. You're learning, if you're newer to copywriting, you're learning that the prospect only cares about themselves. You're also hopefully learning that you're not selling a product. You're not selling a service. You're not selling an app. You're not selling a day at the spa where you can get a facial. You are selling the customer themselves. You're selling, everybody's heard, they're selling the customer a better version of themselves. The customer is actually the product. Think about it that way. You're not selling a product. You're selling a customer. Your copy actually creates a customer. So to do that, the customer needs to see themselves in the copy that you're writing. And if you lead with the product name, you lead with the feature name, you lead with the word we, immediately I'm not seeing myself in it. I'm just not. So your job is to go back through all of your copy. And I've taught this a million times, but people still do it. Your job is to go back over your copy. And if you see your company name, your brand name, your product name, your feature name, the word we at the start of any sentence, you rewrite that. You rewrite that hard. You have to. And an example here, 4 Eyes, we wrote this site many, many years ago, but it still holds up. If there's no we or brand name, you don't have to open with an adjective of some, or a pronoun of some kind. You can go straight in and do the imperative like this headline is doing here. But when we get into the copy itself, when you're going to talk more about something, rewrite everything to begin with the word you. You don't like to be limited, and we don't want to limit you. We didn't start with we don't want to limit you. That would be a really natural place for a lot of people to start. But again, I don't care about what you want. I care first about me. Secondly, and I mean a distant second about you. That's why you can invite people to take your survey any old way you choose. That crosshead is focused on the user. They're still learning about the product. Oh, I can invite people to take my survey any way I choose to. However, it's talking about them first. Then we go over to the body copy, again, left aligned over in a column. You can send plain text or HTML emails, send test emails, customize, schedule, view, and send. All of that is about them, but we opened with the word you. Second paragraph, or you can embed your survey or share, and then the word you again at the start of the sentence. And this is a randomly selected one from our portfolio. You have got to lead with the word you. When you lead with we, it's not only bad for conversion, but it also looks like you haven't done this before. You don't know that it's supposed to be about them. How do you not know that it's supposed to be about them? You have got to make this a thing that you always do. Always, always, always go over your copy, look for the word we, look for the brand name, and make sure it is not the star of the show. Okay, I think we're on the last one. I'm going to town on these, and I see that there are a lot of questions. Okay, so you try to come up with new copy on the fly. This is I think this is absolutely the last one. And this is the problem, and I've seen people do this, where they're presenting copy or they're sharing copy with a client or with a boardroom or whatever it might be, and the room says, I don't know. Oh no, I'm not sure I like that. And they try to come up with new copy right there in front of them. It's crazy. It looks like you haven't done this before and you don't have confidence. It looks like all you are doing is sitting at your desk, dreaming up ways to say things. And that is not what anybody's paying you for. So don't do yourself a disservice by trying to come up with new copy on the fly. And there's no example of this, of how to avoid this. But what I do want you to do is after this, Go over and go onto YouTube or anywhere and just Google like Don Draper presenting Life cereal brand. And you can see how awkward and horrible it is when someone tries to come up with new ideas on the fly, write new copy on the fly. Don Draper has to be drunk to do this. And everybody which he always is, but everybody in the room is mortified that this is happening. You should be mortified too. If you watch it happen, it's embarrassing. If you do it, it's awful. Don't ever do it. So these are the 5 things to do. Center headlines and crossheads. And when body copy is in an intentional column and you're controlling it, you can center body copy there. Most cases, just default to always left aligning it. 2, be intentional with your button copy. 3, personality. Very light. A little goes a long way. Lead with the word you and never live write with a client. So that is it for what we have time for today. I know there are questions around what is a crosshead. A crosshead is what some people call a subhead. So just stop calling it a subhead. That's designer talk. It's a crosshead for copywriters. When you're talking to designers, they'll say subhead. Just say like, oh, copywriters call that a crosshead. Did you know that? And then now they're like, oh, I didn't know that. Tell me more about this crosshead thing. It's just, it goes across. It's a headline that goes across. It's a crosshead. So it's nothing crazier than that. Okay, that is it. We're at the very end. Thank you for participating today. We have, of course, at the beginning, the second Tuesday of every month is for beginners. So if you found this interesting, then come to every second Tuesday of the month. And of course, you can come to all the other ones too. We'll see you on the next Tutorial Tuesday. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Ange. We'll check you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Guys.